Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is September the 28th. 2018. Strong hand, long term thinking, unconfiscatable. One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. Okay, we've got quite a panel this week. JW Weatherman is coming in from some undisclosed location somewhere in some undisclosed country that could be the United States. Arjun Balaji is coming in from the East Coast. Alex Adelman, welcome to the show. He's new to the show. He's over at Lolli, and you've heard me talk about Lolli. He's on the East Coast. We're going to talk about Lolli in the middle of the show, probably. But let's just start off with the big week, the news from this week in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. There have been some pretty exciting things. It hasn't been too wild. There's been some FUD. Well, there's been, what's new, man? There's always FUD. But let's talk about something that's not Bitcoin real quick. They deal with Bitcoin. The Bitmain IPO, something that I see that could be a positive for the space. Arjun, give us your thoughts on what's going on with the Bitmain IPO, and will this be good for Bcash? Will this be good for Bitcoin? Are they going to be able to pull it off?
Those are all good questions. So the big news this week was Bitmain filing a prospectus for their IPO with the Hong Kong Securities Exchange. And it was a really large document. I actually did end up, jumping around a bit, but taking a look, it was, over 400 pages. The numbers were different, reported were different than numbers we've gotten previously, but, none of the previous, to put it in context, none of the previous documents were official filings. In this case, we have an actual filing from the company, and there are a couple of interesting things that people noted coming out of this. One, and this is sort of the headline, number was just the staggering amount of money that Bitmain was making. Bitmain in Q1, Q2 of this year made close to, I think it was, $2.8 billion in revenue, with almost over $1 billion of that coming in net profit, which is, pretty staggering. The interesting way that broke out was that and this is the part that surprised me the most, almost all of that revenue came from selling mining hardware. So Bitmain is the world's leading manufacturer of SHA-256 ASICs, amongst others. At this point, I don't believe that they're the most efficient or most powerful ASIC by any means. I don't think they have been for the last year, but it is staggering to see the market position that they still have. None of this was broken out into Q1, Q2 numbers, but if I had to guess, I would assume that their sales numbers have dropped off substantially from Q1, Q2. They have a couple of parts of their business. One part of their business is obviously manufacturing ASIC hardware. Another part of their business, a much smaller part of their business, it seems to be from a revenue perspective, is their proprietary mining operation. And so they have mines all over China. I think they have over 10 large-scale mines in China. And they announced recently that they were expanding their mining operations into a few different U.S. locations as well. The third big part of their business, and this is the sort of what I would group in as R&D, is all of their work around manufacturing TPUs, or tensor processing units, which are specialized semi devices that are used specifically for deep learning. And so there are only a few companies in the world that are at the scale and level of research excellence that are able to pursue this. But Bitmain has been sitting on so much money, and on top of that is in a pretty unique position where they have this kind of deep domain expertise in ASIC manufacturing. So Bitmain actually has, and this was even more interesting because a lot of these numbers have been opaque for years. Bitmain actually has over 800 employees, working on engineering and research. Software engineers, hardware engineers, electrical engineers, researchers, etc. And of over a 2,500 employee base. And so the numbers looked really interesting. Whether this is sustainable for them is more, I think it's going to be interesting to see. They do have a lot of access to financing as a company of their size in the public markets. That's one of the advantages of being a public company. That said, there are some questions that are lingering amongst a lot of people about how they're accounting for their crypto holdings. Although this document seems to indicate that it's not as big a part of their business as everybody thought it was. It should be interesting to see how they shape out over the year. Samson Mao of Blockstream and a couple of others have written about Bitmain pretty extensively over the last few months about a lot of the internal politics. They've lost a lot of their top talent. But we'll see how it happens. One thing is for sure, though, with this IPO, they definitely do have a lot more access to capital. On Bitcoin Cash, my personal kind of views aside, just even with the market, I think that there are very few marginal buyers left for Bitcoin Cash. But there has been a strong bid on Bitcoin Cash over the last year. A lot of people have speculated that a large amount of that has come from Bitmain and Bitmain associated parties. But we'll see what happens and how long that's sustainable.
First off, Arjun, I have to say that was the most unbiased report on this IPO that I or anything to deal with Bitmain that I've ever heard. I mean, you took emotion out of that, because if you guys, everyone knows this, if you go on Twitter, and you actually mentioned Samson Mao too, and he's a great guy, but when he talks Bitmain, he's not talking in a positive light about it at all. You could tell he's biased. He's not saying he's not biased, but when you read about the Bitmain situation on Twitter, I mean, so much of it is you think it's a horrible thing. It's the end of the world. It's all a big lie, and there's no positive aspects to it. And you just gave a very unbiased report about what's actually in it. You clearly looked into it, and it obviously is a tremendous. It's a long, a big document and everything. So good for you for actually looking at it and giving it quite an unbiased review. I appreciate it. Now, I do want to say, if they're going to be able to raise all this money, and it seems like they're working on a lot of cool. I mean, what was that one thing they're working on that's not even cryptocurrency related or mining related?
Yeah,
What's that called again?
It's an AI. It's deep learning focused, and they've actually been working on it for quite some time.
Okay, and so I have heard that mentioned before. I mean, do you think they really can do that? I mean, they're really going to have a successful project?
The interesting thing about companies is, as they become larger and larger, there's more and more competition, and they're always in kind of this fight to stay relevant. With Bitmain, what we've seen over the last 4 years is that, from 2014, in 2014, there was a lot of competition, both on the ASIC manufacturing side, and even, there were even some people making these kind of like super turbocharged FPGAs at the time. There was a lot of competition in mining, but once as we went into a sustained bear market, Bitmain was the only company that was capitalized well enough to sort of sustain that, keep innovating, keep pushing new products, expand their proprietary mining operations, and they saw a lot of benefit over 2016 and 17 as prices appreciated again. And so now they're in this place where suddenly, as prices appreciated substantially, and larger companies and smaller companies alike have committed more resources into competing on the ASIC side, now they're sort of expanding into other areas and finding other ways to make money. Whether it's incubating smaller businesses like their Tensor research operation, they have an early stage investment arm that makes lots of investments in the space. And so they're finding other ways to diversify. I think that, it's unbiased, but, sort of where it comes from is, on one hand, however I feel about Bitcoin Cash is separate. But on the other hand, and while I think it was even a strategic mistake. I think Bitmain could have made much more money had they stuck to Bitcoin and sort of presented a unified form and not kind of forked away. Although I think some of that remains to be seen. But what Bitmain's built is actually, at the end of the day, it's worth tens of billions of dollars as a business. Pretty much any way you slice the revenue numbers, I think that's a valuation north of $10 billion is justifiable for a business of their size. And it's been pretty amazing to see that happen.
So I mean, people, they're going to get some money tossed their way if they pull out this successful IPO. I'm just wondering, are they going to use some of that money to buy more Bcash to pump up the price?
Yeah, I mean, the other important thing to consider is that these markets are really not that liquid and they're really small. And so the actual amount of marginal buying that is needed to support Bitcoin Cash, especially as the price of Bitcoin Cash is so low, is really not that high. This is another reason. We were talking about the Coinbase bundle and a couple of things before the show, but this is one of the reasons why I noted that market cap is such a hard number to look at. A number of people have spoken about this. I think Nick Carter talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, Nick, that was great. That new metric that he came up with. What was it called? I actually talked about it in another show. Maybe we'll talk about it today too. Yeah, market cap is a terrible metric. But we continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was just going to say market cap is not a great number, given how illiquid pretty much all cryptocurrency is, outside of Bitcoin and to a lesser extent Ethereum and some days XRP. Our market cap is really not a great number. And so, if you look at the amount that needs to be sustained to keep the market cap of Bitcoin Cash reasonably high, the amount of buying that needs to be sustained is not that high.
Wow. You heard it here. I mean, who knows what Bitmain will do with their money. JW, your thoughts on all of this? You're probably a little biased, but let's hear what you got to say about Bcash and Bitmain.
Not biased at all, man. I'm just informed. So, I mean, here's a couple of the great things that came out of the IPO. One is that $100 billion in revenue was made so far just on selling altcoin mining rigs. So these are things that are specifically designed to be worthless in any possible way. Like they cannot accomplish anything of value. $100 billion US have been consumed producing those, and then people actually parting with resources to have those. So that's like 20 aircraft carriers worth of material, actual human capital, creativity, resources, passion, all put on boats, and just 20 aircraft carriers thrown out into the water and set on fire. It's an amazing amount of destruction of wealth. And that's why we don't have to be worried about stuff like inequality, financial inequality, because if the government isn't there to prevent stupid people from completely destroying their own wealth and demoting themselves, they will do that whether they inherited the money from a grandpa or what. If they don't know what they're doing, they're going to destroy their position really, really quickly. And I think what's great, my favorite part about this whole IPO is the amount of stuff like that that's coming up. So we can all just look at it and go, oh, this is what stupid people do with their money. And smart people don't do that. And so the whole system, the free market is actually very functional. There's no such thing as a market failure. The other thing that I really love about it is that there's been hundreds of millions of dollars spent to dump Bitcoin and pump up Bcash. So we know now without any doubt that if Bitmain did not exist, if they hadn't been making the market moves that they were making in the last year, there's no question that Bcash would be much, much lower. And there's no question that Bitcoin would be much higher. So to everybody that got out of Bcash when it was at 15% or 20% or 10% or even 5%, good job, because you showed yourself to be a lot smarter than Jihan, and he's going down. So now what they're doing, this IPO, is they've got these huge bags of Bitcoin Cash. They've got these huge bags of garbage because they thought that they were going to be able to screw everybody over and deceive us into investing into something that has just riddled with security flaws. And now that didn't work, they're going to IPO, which means they're going to sell the shares of this company. And this company owns an incredible amount of this garbage Bcash. But because of accounting rules, as long as the price remains high, they get to claim that they have these hundreds of millions of dollars of assets, right? And so they're going to sell those assets to people in the form of shares of the company, as long as they can manage to keep the price up. So if you have any Bcash left, now is the time to sell it. If you really want to screw Jihan, dump that stuff today, because he is going to end up holding the bag instead of hapless investors through an IPO if the price goes low enough and that makes the IPO unattractive.
Arjun, you have thoughts on this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as much as I dislike Bitmain's kind of existing pole position in ASIC manufacturing and some of the mining centralization problems that it's led to, and kind of how stupid I think many of their business decisions were around Bitcoin Cash, I think that as much as I hate all of these things, I think that the odds of Bitmain somehow being brought down, even if their Bitcoin Cash position was written down to zero, I think is fairly low, just because they have access to a lot of capital. They have a huge business. As long as this kind of shitcoinery, sorry, I always forget we're not supposed to curse on the show. As long as this altcoinery kind of IQ arbitrage continues to take place, I don't think that's going to disappear, at least for the next year or two. I think Bitmain has a sustainable business in place. So, we'll see what happens. But I think that for everything that people say about Bitmain, like a lot of what they've done and the strategic missteps that they've made have been great, because it's allowed for new and kind of sustained competition. So it's always exciting to see more competition and on the axis of sort of democratizing mining.
Alex hasn't spoken yet. Do you have any thoughts on this? Alex is going to speak a lot. Trust me, he's got some Lolli stuff to say. But any thoughts on this whole situation, this back and forth here?
Yeah, so I think, IPOs are the original ICOs, and I think that the fact that everybody has access to invest in almost an abstraction layer of Bitcoin, even if it's Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, I think it's probably net good for people to dip their toes in it, and I think it's a good thing. I'm curious. What I was not able to find is what is their percentage of miners that they're selling versus ones that they're actually running internally. I think it's kind of important for how they're running their company and how decentralized it is. Just kind of worries me how centralized an organization like this is and how much they can control the cost with all this new money, and what they can kind of do to manipulate prices.
Do you know the answer to that one, Arjun? That's an interesting statistic.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but at least how they accounted for it this year, most of their revenues this year came from selling hardware, not from proprietary mining. But with that, it's important to understand that as the longer we go into a bear market, the more of their business is going to depend on their mining operation and less on kind of external demand of ASICs.
I want to go back to something Alex said. Alex, is this for the space in general? This is going to be a big. I think it's an interesting moment, because no pure, and it's not a pure cryptocurrency company, but it mostly is. They're doing this AI stuff also. But it's going IPO. IPO is something that's everyone in the mainstream finance can understand. Will this be good for the space in general? That it add some sort of traditional finance legitimacy to it? That now there's this big cryptocurrency company that's going IPO. Personally, I think it'll bring some. If they pull it off, if they really do it, and they raise a lot of money, it could bring a lot of interest to cryptocurrency in general and to Bitcoin. I mean, what do you think about that, Alex?
Yeah, it legitimizes the space, and it lets everybody sort of play in it without having to, have a wallet or have to buy actual crypto. So as many touch points as possible, I think the better. If you could go on Coinbase, or not Coinbase, Robinhood, and buy Bitmain instead of buying Bitcoin, I don't think that's a bad thing. I do think that it's a little scary to see like as big a company as they could and probably will be. The decisions that they've made in the past have been both good and bad, and they seem to be making these decisions without consensus. And so it scares me a little bit. But I think the goal of an IPO is to let everybody vote, let everyone have a voice in the company's decision making, and it can slow them down in a good way. So we'll see how it ends up playing out. But I think the IPO is a good thing for them. So it seems like a lot of their decisions have been made opportunistically, and as any company, they want to make money. I think that the announcements with AI internally, they're incentivized to have AI that solves these math equations faster to mine more crypto. So anything that they can do to advance that is good. I doubt that they'll open source it, but it might give a good roadmap for other people who are working on it in their basements. So that might be net good. But yeah, I think there's a lot of good things from the IPO.
Now, JW, I get the feeling from what you're saying, you don't think they're going to be able to pull this thing off successfully, that it might end up being disastrous. Am I interpreting you correctly there? Because do you think if they pull this thing off successfully, then it could be a positive for the space?
I don't think they're going to pull it off. They might. I mean, I'd probably give it a 60% chance it doesn't happen. And the reason is that they just don't have any good news. Normally IPOs in the US, there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of excitement about the future, right? It doesn't matter how much you sold last year. Everybody that's buying this stock is thinking about what you're going to sell next year. And they don't, from what I can tell, I don't know why I would be excited as an investor. I mean, they're selling hardware that's 2 years out of date. They've got more competition on the horizon than they ever have before. The new competition, I think eBang? Somebody is selling a 16 nanometer, which is huge, right? It's a big fat chip that supposedly is going, unless these guys are lying and they don't have a reputation for lying so far, will blow away the 10 nanometer stuff that Bitmain can't even get released, right? They're constantly having failed tests at this point, failing tape outs and things like that. So I don't know what there is to really be excited about. And they've got this huge bag of Bitcoin Cash, right? And so, I mean, come on. If a US company was about to IPO and Roger Ver was one of the main spokespersons, they would be just destroyed, right? They would have no chance. That guy is such a clown that they would not be able to have the legitimacy they need. I understand this is in China and it's a different ballgame, but for all of those reasons, it seems weird to me that this would happen. I know that there's a lot of money. I know they've made a lot of money in the past. Their books look good because of the price of Bitcoin Cash has been held up. But if I wouldn't buy Bitcoin Cash for $200. I wouldn't buy Bitcoin Cash for $50. So for me, when I look at their balance sheet, it's totally different. And I got to think there's a lot of people that, especially if they're intelligent enough to just see the trades, right? You don't have to be a genius to see that they dumped a ton of Bitcoin and they bought a bunch of Bitcoin Cash. And so obviously they have, in the sense that they have wanted it, for whatever reason, they've given up their Bitcoin. That has affected the price of Bitcoin Cash. There's no question about that. So as a potential investor in an IPO, I'd be thinking, well, I hope that Bitcoin Cash is really worth that. If I don't think it's really worth that, let me put a discount on there. And then I don't think the IPO is looking so hot. But if they do pull it off, and they very well may be able to pull it off, I don't know. If they do pull it off, I don't think it's going to be good for anybody, because what we're talking about is a group of people that have established that for a while they were making really good investment decisions, and for the last 2 or 3 years they've done nothing but make really bad investment decisions and ride on the wealth that they created previously. So if that's true, if we've got a group of people that are just brain dead and are not making good decisions with the resources that they're being entrusted with, entrusting them with more resources, I don't think is going to be good for anybody. But we'll see how it all plays out.
Excellent. Arjun, I'll let you have the concluding remarks on this topic.
I agree with most of what JW said. I personally, I actually do still own a little bit of Bitcoin Cash from Bitcoin. I never split pre-fork, but the majority of the Bitcoin Cash that I received, I ended up selling, in 2017. There's no price at which, I would be interested in or willing to buy Bitcoin Cash. And I think that the majority of the market does feel this way. I think that Bitcoin Cash will eventually die. But the death will, as much as we like, it won't be fast and quick. It'll probably be slow, drawn out, and really boring to watch until the very end.
Well, as you said before, though, it doesn't take much to pump it up. If they raise this money, they'll be able to pump the price, and people get excited. They're like sheep. It's going up. I'll buy it now.
That's the biggest problem. But it'll be interesting to see what Bitmain does. I think that the next several years are certainly going to be harder for them than the last few years were. There's sort of less demand for their products. They have a lot more competition. They have some capital problems, as others have mentioned, and they're losing a lot of their best talent. So I think it's certainly going to be an uphill battle, but we'll see.
All right. Very, very good. Now we're talking about Bcash. We're talking about altcoins. So we're going to talk about Coinbase. But first, everyone watching this, pound that freaking like button. Check out the link section below. You can learn all about these dudes. I linked to all their pertinent information below. And of course, you can watch my archives at disruptmeister.com. I got over 1,000 videos there. So let's, JW, let's talk about Coinbase. They have this new product called the bundle, or they will soon. I haven't explored it that much, but you'll be able to, you can push one button and you'll get all their, if you're a newbie especially, you'll fall for this, and you'll be able to get a weighted basket of all the coins they have offered there, which are currently 5 coins. But it appears they're going to have quite a few coins there listed within the year. They have information about the top 50 coins there also. And my issue with this, Coinbase can do whatever they want to do, but this is an on-ramp for a lot of newbies in the United States, because this is where you can easily use your US dollars to buy Bitcoin and now a bunch of altcoins soon enough. But they're putting it out as if Bitcoin is just one of the top 50 coins, that there's really, there's not that much difference from number 43 and Bitcoin. And it's kind of pushing people in a direction, and they can do this if they want to, pushing people in a direction of diversification for the sake of diversification. What do you think about Coinbase and the direction they're going in, JW?
Yeah, I think this is just the continuation of the scam that these guys have been running for a long time. I talked to somebody, this was probably 2 years, maybe not that, maybe a year ago. Actually, maybe it was only 9 months ago. Gosh, it goes by fast. Anyway, talked to them. They were interested and said that they were going to, buy Bitcoin, weren't sure how to do it, whatever. I told them to use local Bitcoins. Talked to them like 2 months later and asked them how it went. And they said, they found this great site that, is venture backed and seemed more legitimate, felt more trustworthy than local Bitcoins. And then they found that that Ethereum was actually cheaper. So they bought that. So this has been a very long, at least for the last year, these guys have been running this scam. And the scam is essentially to deceive investors into thinking that crap is valuable, right? That these garbage investments that, if you were in a trailer park and sitting on your front porch, you might think were a good idea. But if you had any level of sophistication at all, if you had any knowledge of the technology, you would immediately discard them as worthless. But being able to present those things as if they're legitimate, right? And, I was annoyed with the guy, and he was like, look, I don't know, it seemed very legitimate. And then it looked like they had this very short curated list of assets that, when there's only 4 or 5 listed, you got to think that they picked the best 4 or 5. And I couldn't disagree with them. I think it's a bad idea to invest in things you don't understand in general, but it's a good scam, right? Now, if we had any sort of a functional legal system, right? If there was any way to prosecute people that had committed acts of fraud, then these people that are presenting, arsenic as if it's, you know, baby milk, they would end up going to jail, right? They would be making restitution payments for the rest of their life, right? The CEO of Bitcoin would absolutely go to jail if he listed something and gave people, intentionally deceived people into thinking it was more legitimate than it is, which is absolutely what this game's all about. These guys aren't stupid. They know that Bitcoin Cash is a joke, right? They know that these other coins are not government hard, and if it's not government hard, what's the point? They're not dumb. They know the game, but they also know that they can make money screwing people over, and there's not likely to be any consequences. So I think they could run it for a long time. I do think that they should consider the possibility, though, that over time we are going to fix the justice system and there's not going to be a statute of limitations.
Well, wait, now you're accusing them of doing
fraud.
Let me say, they are
theft and fraud.
Well, first of all, you know, Coinbase does everything. They follow all the government's rules. They're in bed with the government. I mean, they don't lie about that. I mean,
look, man, if
so they're not going to get prosecuted for any. I mean, I'm not saying they did anything illegal either, but
so here's the thing: would you say that if Coinbase was based in Nigeria, if they were running a scam out of Nigeria and they were selling garbage, and we all have the technical knowledge to know that it's crap, but they're convincing people that it's not based on the way they present it and the way they make it look like it's a curated list, would you be saying there's no chance that these guys are going to get in trouble? No, it's because you're in this American mindset that American laws are legitimate, that you think, oh, well, they're playing by the rules, they're not going to get in trouble. It is, first of all, it's very possible that we fix the legal system and Brian ends up behind bars in the next 10 years. It is very much a possibility. It's happened to many other countries around the world. It's also possible and should be recognized that when you're in an environment that doesn't have a functional justice system, it's all about political power. So the question really is, will enough people get pissed off? Will enough people get burned to where a senator can stand up and say, Brian needs to go to jail, and his electorate will appreciate that? The moment that happens, that guy's in jail, because we do not have a justice system. We don't have laws. It is all about violence and the will of force at this point. So as soon as we recognize that, I think those guys would get really, really uncomfortable about screwing people over. And I you know, it's a long shot, right? Give it a 1 in 10 chance that guy ends up getting, abused in prison, but that still gives me some comfort. Because
I got to say, most people, the 80%ers in this country, they love stuff like this. I mean, they want diversification for the sake of diversification. They're not going to contact a senator one day and say we were ripped. I mean, they're not going to feel like they were ripped off.
Oh, wait until they get wrecked. The most dangerous person in the world is a pissed off investor. And the closer they are to the trailer park, the more dangerous they are and the more aggressive that they'll get. So you see what happens when, a pension fund goes negative. They get bloodthirsty really, really quick. And a lot of these altcoins and a lot of these scams, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars, and a lot of little people that will get really, really passionate once they realize that they've been completely hoodwinked. Now, right now, I think there's a lot of people that have lost money, but they don't realize that it was a scam. They think it was a legitimate experiment. But over the next few years, the knowledge that people like I have is going to trickle out. And they're not going to look back and go, well, I invested in a startup that had potential and didn't work out. That's different. That's a whole different emotional experience than those guys knew. They knew and they stuck me and they enjoyed it. And now I'm really pissed off. So if it happens at scale, it could get really interesting.
I just want to say we're at a point right now where if enough, and this will happen, another BitConnect type thing will appear and everyone will pile into it. So I'm just, and so if the masses are willing to get into something that is truly a Ponzi, like a BitConnect type thing, we're at that point where they'll just pile in, and people will be making money again. That they won't complain about something like Coinbase yet. I mean, we're not even close to that yet. But
eventually the party's going to end. That's what I'm saying. Like, we can continue to pump and we can continue to suck in more dumb money into the Ponzi scheme. But what you're not thinking about is that all Ponzi schemes end. Well, they don't last forever.
I think you're giving dumb money a lot of too much credit. There's always going to be so much dumb money out here. I don't know. I've got a different take on the world. But anyway, let's. We're going back and forth on this. Alex, what's your take on Coinbase and altcoins and their offering and all of this?
So I don't necessarily completely disagree with JW for the short term, but I think long term, I think it's net good. I see like it kind of consolidates all of our experiences with Bitcoin. I think everyone has bought some sort of alt in the past, and only to realize, wait a second, Bitcoin can do that, or wait a second, like maybe this doesn't need to be on the blockchain. So I think it like takes the juxtaposition of an altcoin with Bitcoin for you to realize and learn. And $25 for a lesson to learn the future of the worldwide currency and to learn a lesson in economics is a pretty cheap lesson. I think it's a really good thing that Coinbase is doing it. My issue is how they're doing it. I think that they just pick these coins sort of on their end, when I think it should be again consensus through their user group, their user base. It should be consensus through some sort of vote. We at Lolli are like, thinking about things, I think, a little bit differently of how we come to a decision like this of just this. It isn't about our 5 coins. I think it should be about what are the coins that I think matter to the community, and then let's put that together for the next group of people. So I think it's a good thing that like this, it's out there. I don't necessarily agree with the coins that they selected, but they're trying to educate. I liked what they launched more quietly that didn't get as much press, but if you saw like their learn section, I think it's one of the best, most comprehensive beginner learning sections that I've seen on any site. And I thought it was great. It's kind of Bitcoin for beginners and crypto for beginners.
But let me ask you about this in the learn section. I haven't explored it that much. They're going to list the top 50 coins though. So
everybody has everyone has to take that approach. Like, I mean, Arjun and I had a great conversation about a year ago that largely inspired Lolli. And it was a lot. I was doing the same shit. Same thing. I was like, oh, what about Litecoin? What about Ethereum? Like, you can build all these cool things with it. And he was just like, think about the basics. Like, think about reread Satoshi white paper. Like, look at Bitcoin. Like, can you really not do that with Bitcoin in the future? So I think there's like, I think it takes like an easy on ramp, and if the easiest on ramp is a $25 lesson in learning about what is Bitcoin and what is it in relation to these others. Like, if people were just coming in and buying Bitcoin, it doesn't necessarily teach them about these other things. And so they might get some sort of FOMO and they're like, oh, well, I made 40% on Bitcoin, but I could have made 1,000% on, this altcoin. And so people that just being opportunistic beings, they're going to get like almost a sense of FOMO. But if they see the juxtaposition of like, Bitcoin going up and over time and Ethereum going down, or Litecoin going down, or Classic going down, I think it's really good to see as a sort of a pie chart. And if it wasn't there, they sort of have this like fake FOMO going on of these that they're not getting in to these other coins.
All right, Arjun, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that Coinbase is. I think there's kind of 2 things that I want to address. First is that I think index products in this space. I even hesitate to call it a space. That's a different topic altogether. But crypto index products, I think are mostly misguided in their approach. Because this comes from a mental model that people take from traditional capital markets, and not a mental model per se, but a model from traditional capital markets applied to crypto, and think that it just sort of transfers one-to-one. In traditional capital markets, if you look at, there's all sorts of different index products, but if you look at, for example, like an S&P 500 index product, there's a lot of reasons why that potentially makes sense for a retail investor. It's very, very low cost to administer. So you're seeing all the returns in your portfolio. You're diversified across a number of names, so you don't have any sort of equity concentration risk. So if you're an individual investor, you want to buy equities, that product might make a lot of sense. In cryptocurrencies, where I think there's going to be at least a winner take most, if not a winner take all dynamic, I don't think that approach really makes a lot of sense. most of these index products are diversified across worse fundamentals, because I think that pretty much every project in this space outside of Bitcoin has worse fundamentals. However you want to really slice that, than Bitcoin does. They're less secure from a hash rate perspective, less secure from a code perspective. They're the other sort of axes that these index funds are diversified across. They're diversified across higher volatility. Almost all the projects listed in Coinbase's index have substantially higher volatility than Bitcoin. They have a lot less liquidity available. The order books are really thin, and they tend to spike up and down a lot more. Which kind of hooks into the volatility remark I made earlier. And they're highly correlated. So even if you're buying some other project that's not Bitcoin, there's a chance that when we're in a speculative bubble, or when we're crashing, the project is sort of a levered bet on Bitcoin itself, that it's reasonably highly correlated. We've seen correlations or have been pretty high year to date. And so personally, I don't think that index products are great products. I think that sort of introducing a lot of information to an average investor who doesn't really know much or doesn't have the sort of technical ability to discern between what's good and what's real and what's not. I think it can be potentially very dangerous. So I think that they need, if they're offering the product, which they seem to have decided to do already, they should probably do a much better job really focusing on education. But this stuff is hard, and Coinbase is a huge company. I think it's important to realize that Coinbase isn't a Bitcoin company. They haven't been for years. I don't think that at least the external perception, even if you look at Brian's Twitter, is not that they're particularly even fans of Bitcoin, versus Ethereum and the rest of the kind of altcoin casino. And then the world that we live in right now, Coinbase is they're not really our sort of like friendly neighborhood Bitcoin company. They're a casino, right? And Brian's the casino owner, and ultimately what they care about is not even necessarily like what is best for Bitcoin, but it's sort of like what will make Coinbase the entity the most money. And in a world where just Bitcoin wins, Coinbase probably has a much smaller business versus a world where they create kind of the open financial system that they're talking about, a world with dozens or hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of different tokens. Many of these securities, digital securities that they offer trading of. I think when you're a casino owner, you want to create the biggest casino possible, and I think that's what they're optimizing around.
That's an interesting point. And I want to, JW, I'll let you have the conclusionary remarks on this subject matter. If they're the biggest casino out there, do you think anyone's going to be able to surpass them? Do you think they're going to be purchased by a larger company, or do you see failure in their near future?
I think casino is the exact perfect way to describe what they're doing and their client base, because investors know something that the market doesn't, and they profit from that knowledge. And sometimes they make mistakes, but they always have a hypothesis, right? Then there's other people that just show up and they go, "Oh, shiny," and they pull the lever and see what happens. And they don't really care that that the system's stacked against them. They kind of do, but they're not taking it seriously enough to investigate it. And I think that's what Coinbase is for. I think that's what the stock market in general is for people just to throw money at companies like Pepsi or, I don't know, whatever, Google, Facebook. They don't really know what's going on inside these companies, and they just throw money at them just to see what will happen. And I think that from public school, from the time of 2 or 3, we've all been indoctrinated and, quote, educated in order to believe that this is what responsible, smart people do, that we diversify. We don't have to know anything. We just throw money at a lot of places. It's like you walk in the casino, you don't use 1 slot machine, you use 30, because then you have your risk is diversified. So I think that is exactly what's going on. I do think that they're going to be surpassed. I think that something like BISC, which is a decentralized exchange that allows you to buy and sell whatever crap coin or Bitcoin that you want, is going to replace them, because they're not going to be able to compete with fees. They're not going to be able to compete with just the the regulatory overhead, right? Coinbase is a business that's based in a district in a region where they have to constantly pay off the mafia in order to operate. If there's a decentralized exchange that doesn't have to pay off the mafia to operate, it's going to be very hard for Coinbase to compete. And I think that we're getting very close to those sort of things coming online. So I think long term they're toast. They don't have a business model. They never really did. That's why they're always doing things that are kind of weird and odd and not directly related to what you would expect a Bitcoin exchange to be focused on. They just don't know how to make money. And they've done okay, but mostly because there's just been a lot of excitement in the space in general. But if you're an early investor in Coinbase, you're still a loser compared to if you had just bought a little bit of Bitcoin. So yeah, these guys are not geniuses. Jihan wasn't a genius, isn't a genius. All the hero worship that we give people that end up running big businesses just because they happen to start a business in a space that exploded and they didn't really have any insight into why it would happen or not. Those guys are short-lived. So these guys will be short-lived too.
Classic JW there. Well, I mean, we've only been around, the space has only been around for a short time anyway, so it will be interesting to see how things evolve over the next 10 years. I've got a strong hand and I'm patient and I'm just holding on to that Bitcoin. But we're talking about businesses evolving, businesses being born. We've got a guy here, Alex, who started his own business here, Lolli, which I've talked about before. Tell us about Lolli. Tell us what's going on. You've been working very hard. You can't even stay up to date with all the current events, although you're doing a pretty good job with it. You're speaking great today. So tell us about Lolli. What is this Lolli thing?
Yeah, so we've created a way for people to easily earn Bitcoin when they shop online. So I think one of my frustrations with the space is just I couldn't share it with my sister and my mom, my friends from back home, and so I that growing frustration, I think we turned it into a product. My last company, we built it over about 6 years, started it out of college. We built an e-commerce gateway that let retailers sell their products anywhere. Built that, got acquired again by a company called Ebates. Ebates is the biggest cashback provider, and learned a lot about that model. Ended up taking some time off after we parted ways and kept coming back to this distribution problem that Bitcoin has. How do you give it to this next wave of people? How do you spread it further, farther, wider? And I kept coming back to shopping. Shopping is something everybody does. I don't need to sell anyone on shopping. It's pretty straightforward. How do we take that model of the cashback model and give it, and instead of giving cashback, giving people Bitcoin, making it easier to start your first wallet, earn Bitcoin when you do something that you're already going to do. So far, we launched 3 weeks ago, and it's gone really, really well. We have a lot of great users, a very active community, people who are trying to figure out, how do I earn more? We get emails every day that are just like, hey, I'm about to buy a blue velvet couch, and how do I earn the most Bitcoin doing it? And so we'll send them the top 3 places that we're working with. We'll send them Overstock, Jet, Walmart, places that you shop every day. So it's been a really fun ride. We have over 500 retailers on board. I've been personally surprised with how many top brands want to get involved in the space and haven't been scared away from the idea that it's crypto. They understand that it's an opportunity, and what Arjun and JW were talking about before with Coinbase and some of the the negatives of the when companies optimize, or what are companies optimizing for? And if you understand what their KPIs are internally, you understand retailers want sales. If we can give them more sales and they can play a part in this economy of Bitcoin, I think we're giving we're giving consumers an easy way to get involved in Bitcoin. But I think one of the coolest parts of Lolli is that we're giving real brands the ability to play into Bitcoin, which is even just as important as getting consumers involved.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is great that people can get Bitcoin by just shopping. I mean, it sounds simplistic, but it is, and it's awesome. And I'm glad the more people that can get their hands on Bitcoin, the better. And so I that's why I bring this up. And it just, when I think it was Arjun who informed me about this in the first place, or it was on his Twitter feed, actually. I was like, this is a good idea. Now, there is a question from the audience here, and it's a long one, but you'll be able to extrapolate upon it. When will Lolli partner with Uber? This opens up a conversation about Lolli and Uber every ride. Partnering with restaurants invites conversations among dinner parties. Paying attention to social interaction while using Lolli could be significantly more powerful than buying clothes alone at home from Macy's. But even so, Lolli could be so much more than it first appears. Okay, so what do you think about that statement there? The guy's bullish on Lolli. He won. I'll tell you that.
I mean, we're working on a lot over here. We have a small team. I think we're very cognizant that you can't build everything in a day. And so we started with, I think, what is a very much our minimum viable product. For the last 9 months, I've been selling to retailers this idea behind closed doors. I think we stayed in stealth for as long as we could. And we got over 500 retailers. The long view is how do we get every touch point? I talked about at the beginning of the show. I think as many touch points as you can have where Bitcoin is top of mind, or Lolli is, in our case, Lolli is top of mind, where it's, okay, I'm about to make this purchase. Is it on Lolli? I'm about to go take this Uber ride. Let me start with Lolli. I think that is a really good thing to train, because as much as you can have mind share with Bitcoin, as much as you can have mind share with Lolli, I think that's good for us and good for Bitcoin. We're in talks with everybody right now, trying to convince Uber, trying to convince Lyft to come on board. We actually have Lyft's driver program. So if you sign up to be a driver, you can earn quite a bit of Bitcoin. And I'm working on Uber right now. But I'd love to work with all of them.
Now, I think part of this guy's point was that it's more beneficial to be involved with the social interaction aspect of it, that it'll leave more of an imprint on a person instead of just sitting there buying pants online, talking, doing these involved in businesses that involve social interaction and talking. It could leave a bigger imprint and cause more people to stick with it. I mean, do you see yourselves going in that direction to get more out there instead of just people sitting at their computer and doing it?
Exactly. There's only so much I want to share about our long-term roadmap. But I think that you can sort of think about, and you can put two and two together, but basically where do we spend the most amount of time and where do we spend the most money? And a lot of it is in your pocket. It's in your wallet. How do we, create the next credit card? What does an on-chain credit look like in the future? How could I go anywhere and use Bitcoin or earn Bitcoin? That's the way that the roadmap is. That's what it's looking for the next 5 to 10 years. We want to give every touch point, and we want to incentivize people to use Bitcoin where it is more advantageous to use it. So one thing I think a lot about when I'm not thinking of what is this button that we have to add on this web page and short-term thinking, but when I zoom out and I think about long-term thinking, where is Bitcoin more a better solution than fiat? And a lot of times it's in cross-border commerce. So a lot of our retailers are thinking about how do we attract users in the UK? How do we attract users in APAC? And so they're looking at us as being like Bitcoin is this beautiful international currency almost from day one, and Lolli is even in some cases from day one more advantageous than fiat, because you don't have cross-border commerce, you don't have forex fees, you just earn your Bitcoin wherever you are in the world. And so as more and more retailers sell internationally and more consumers buy the brands on Instagram and buy these brands that are US based, if I'm in Japan and if I buy something, it is less expensive for us to send them Bitcoin than it is to send them $5 in cash that converts to Japanese yen. So if you play that out of all these transactions, Bitcoin is actually a far more efficient vehicle than fiat. And like those are the kind of things we're thinking of. You can't send someone $5 in Japanese yen from the US. And so Lolli makes it actually more efficient to earn like a stable currency being Bitcoin than it is to send them cash. That's where I think, like, if we could be essentially the Visa on top of Bitcoin, and let everybody earn Bitcoin for all purchases cross border, I think that's a better world, and that's the direction we're going in.
Dude, this guy is in motion. This is awesome. Pound that freaking like button. Are you guys hiring anything? Do you need any new people? There's plenty of people watching this who want to help out or at least try out.
Yeah, so we'll be, I mean, right now we've been bombarded with support. People are reaching out being like, hey, how do I earn more? How do I, like, where, you know, they're asking, you know, I'm buying, I have to buy shoes. I want to buy basketball shoes. Where do I buy them? So we're looking for people to help out with support. We're looking for great engineers. We're looking for a head of marketing right now. So we want to create, like, you know, just people who love Bitcoin, people who love this idea for Lolli, and want to help spread it to as many people as possible.
All right. Now, I just want to tell the people in the comments, remember, he's not saying to spend Bitcoin. He's saying to earn Bitcoin. He's talking this Lolli thing. You're getting Bitcoin. You're not spending it. You're getting it by buying stuff. Because if you got to buy a pair of pants, why not buy a pair of pants where you can get some Bitcoin back? So that's what this is about. JW, do you have any thoughts on Lolli?
Yeah, actually, it's probably the only points or airline miles program that's going to work out in all of history. So good job, man. I hope people get a few Satoshis here and there and don't sell them, and it works out well for them. So it seems like a cool idea. I like the marketing angle. I personally hate rewards points and that sort of stuff. It just pisses me off to have the experience. But then again, I've never gotten reward points in Bitcoin, so what the hell? It might be something I'd enjoy. So good job. I like that you have managed to come up with an idea that has to do with Bitcoin that isn't a flat out scam. So you're already in the top like 2% right off the bat, and I hope it works out. But it seems like a cool idea.
Be a 2%er. Be a 2%er. He's a 2%. Sorry.
And JW brings up a really good point, and it's been sort of a selling point for retailers. Retailers love point systems because they're basically arbitrary, like, you know, cash back, or they give the consumer incentive to spend. With the way that I think it's, you know, I'm on the phone with retailers all day to try to, you know, get them on the platform, and I was on the phone with one of our top retailers. And this guy had never bought Bitcoin. He knew very little about it. And I was explaining to him Bitcoin. I was explaining to him Lolli, and I hadn't used this language before, but he's like, wait a second, Lolli or Bitcoin is like points without borders and without any control. And I was like, wow, like, you nailed it. And so he gave me that sort of ammunition to go to all these other retailers and say, Bitcoin is points without borders, and I kind of love that. It's a really good insight. Thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great way to sell it, man. I think that's what money is, right? That's what global, secure, sound money is. But so few people have that concept in their head. They just can't imagine an asset that nobody has control over. So you could use that. I think that's a great way to sell Lolli, is just to say, take credit for what Bitcoin is, right? Like, these are points that nobody can take from you and nobody can control what they're worth. And historically they've done pretty well. And, you can use them with any company. It's not just, United Airline miles or whatever. And it's not cash that's going to tend to go down in purchasing power over time, and you can use it across borders. I mean, obviously that's a whole lot more than you'd want to put in your 3 bullet points, but I think that's a pretty cool way to sell your product.
Yeah, the way that I usually explain it to people who are new is that Bitcoin is this kind of new, digital Swiss bank that nobody controls. But the big new thing is that there's only a scarce number of units of that you can participate in, and that kind of, once you own them, if you decide not to sell them, you kind of own them forever. So if you own 0.1% of this Swiss bank, you kind of own that for you own that forever. And so it's kind of like Lolli is the easiest way to earn my way a part of it if I don't want to buy it myself.
Well, I love this. I love this points without borders line that you guys are coming up with here. This is good stuff. And again, this just, people always say, well, no one's doing anything with Bitcoin. It's just speculation. No, this dude's building a real nice business around it. And so we can only imagine, in the next 2 years, in 2 years from now, in the year 2020, what type of Bitcoin businesses will be around. And it's so good to start covering this on the ground floor, and people will look back on this show one day and be like, oh man, they were talking about this before, it was totally mainstream and everything. So I love to bring the people out there these stories before they really explode, because this will be a big one. So Alex, really good luck with all of this stuff, and I'm glad you got to talk about it on today's show today. I do want to quickly, we want to bring up one other subject that happened this week. I think it's important to bring up the 1Broker situation and the weakness of having a centralized Bitcoin business or centralized crypto business, whatever or any centralized business. What can happen with it? Arjun, can you quickly say what happened with 1Broker and how this might happen again to other companies out there?
Yeah, absolutely. The quick summary on 1Broker is that 1Broker was a US based, actually Marshall Islands based platform that let people trade, a whole bunch of assets. Some of them were crypto assets. Some were CFDs, collateral for different swap contracts that they're used in crypto. Some crypto companies like Abra leverage them, but they were offering CFDs on traditional securities. So for example, I'd be able to buy a CFD against a stock. If there was a dividend on the stock, they'd offer the dividend to me, all settled in Bitcoin, but not actually requiring me to connect a bank account, etc. These are, most definitely illegal securities. Their domain name was seized by the FBI yesterday. These are the risks to running a company that's offering unregistered securities products, or offering not doing KYC, which was another big problem in the 1Broker situation. And it has raised a lot of interesting questions over the last 48 hours about the viability and security of a number of crypto exchanges. I think most of the attention has been targeted towards Binance, which is based in Malta, and BitMEX, which is based out of the Seychelles.
The reach of the U.S. government. JW, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it was kind of inevitable. I mean, it's how this stuff works, right? So if you're trying to start it, like if you were trying to become, I don't know, let's say you're starting a new business to be an architect today, I would say don't create a business. Don't register the business with the government. Do it as a pseudonym. Accept only Bitcoin for your work, because soon there's going to be competitors that do. And when you don't have that mafia that is imposing, and I'm not saying don't pay your taxes, because I probably would pay taxes depending on what jurisdiction you're in. But even if you pay your taxes and you basically follow the rules, by being pseudonymous, being basically on the dark web, you have so much less overhead and so many fewer costs than your competition, that there's two ways to look at it. One is you're going to be able to make more money than your competition. But the other is that if you go legitimate, right? If you go official, I won't say legitimate, because there's nothing legitimate about having to fill out 250 forms a month when you're a small business. That's completely illegitimate. But if you go the unofficial route, let's say, you have an advantage. The flip side is true as well. If you're an architect and you're running a big behemoth corporate, very bureaucratic, even if it's like a 2-person company, you have a ton of bureaucratic overhead involved. How are you going to compete with the architect that shows up and doesn't have that bureaucratic overhead? So I think we're at the point now where if anybody starts a business, they should seriously consider doing it on the dark web. And I think that if you're an exchange, if you're trying to do something that is at all in a legal gray area, then there's no question that you have to do that, because if you don't, you're probably going to get arrested. And even if you don't get arrested, when somebody like BISC comes along and is a decentralized government hard exchange, you're going to be screwed. So that's my overall thoughts on just running a business in general, let alone, something that's maybe questionable.
Yeah, crypto gives us some new options about not having to be official businesses. It's a lot more leeway now, and it's a very interesting points you brought up there. Well, Alex, do you have any thoughts on the 1Broker situation and centralized businesses that can be cracked down on by the U.S. government wherever they are?
I mean, it's a little scary, I think, to be honest. Not to say that we're bad actors in the space, but the fact that like a company could be shut down for anything is just like it's a little scary. To be honest, I just learned about it. Did not come across my radar until now. But I think like we don't want to make any bad decisions along the way, but at the same time, we want to be innovative, and we want to be a leader in the space. So it's a little scary to think like you make one bad decision and it might not be with malcontent. It could be the same outcome as we've seen with 1Broker.
All right. As a business owner there, you have a different perspective on all this. Is very interesting. Okay, well we've had a big show here today, and there's some other things I wanted to talk about FUD issues, but let's keep it on the positive here. Let's get everybody's conclusionary remarks. And Alex, you told us a lot about Lolli and everything. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that was left off? Any concluding thoughts about anything that has to deal with Bitcoin or cryptocurrency? And also with Lolli, you just earned can you earn altcoins there too, or?
No, just Bitcoin.
Awesome. Oh, good. So what are your conclusionary thoughts for the day here? Anything that was left off?
No, great conversation. I learned a lot. I appreciate all the great insights, Arjun and JW. And it's always a pleasure to talk. And great questions, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Well, you were great. A lot of people are interested in this, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it grows. And hey, man, I just want people to get their hands on Bitcoin somehow. So this is a way. Arjun, any thoughts? Anything that was left off? Any topic you wanted to bring up? That wasn't brought up, a big story that was forgotten?
Yeah, I think that the kind of last story that's been on everybody's minds is the retrospective that's been done around the CVE bug in Bitcoin Core, which I think is it's been interesting. There's been a whole bunch of different analyses about what could we have done differently, what are the sort of failure states of the bug, and kind of what could have gone wrong. But I think that the way that I was pretty impressed with the way that it was handled, from a disclosure perspective to an awareness sort of campaign after the fact, and so thankful that another day has gone by, another week has gone by with nothing going wrong, and every day that goes by like that, the better off and stronger I think Bitcoin is.
Excellent. So I was going to ask JW what your conclusionary remarks are, but first we'll comment on the bug FUD and everything. What was just said. What are your thoughts on the bug? Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean the bug is definitely serious, right? Like we all should kind of take a punch in the nose and think about what needs to happen moving forward, and anything that we can do to make it less likely. Security bugs are tough because you're always going to have them, right? At some level, we just don't have the technology to build code that is as reliable as we would like. On the other hand, companies that I've worked with that, and most of the work that I've done has been with companies. I've done some open source projects, but nothing that's really mattered from a security standpoint. But the companies that I've worked with that when something like this happens, they do freak out. They do have we gotta change things a little bit moment. I think they do better in the long run. I do think that that's happening in Bitcoin. I think everybody's taking this really, really seriously, and they're not blowing it off. I think you always have the people that are overreacting and super emotional about it, and then the people that are saying, oh, it's no big deal at all. But I think the bulk of the folks involved are, they've been very sobered by it, which is the right response. And I think that it does call into question, our priorities a bit. Like, how much do we really need Lightning? Lightning is great, but I think a lot of us would have preferred not to have Lightning and not to have this bug. Even though it's being addressed and it's being dealt with, it's scary, and it could have been very, very bad. And if we have bugs like that, there's a reasonable chance that we have other bugs like that as well. So I think the right approach is a lot of fear and trembling moving forward, and a lot more willingness to be slower about making changes, even great changes like SegWit that are security fixes, right? Like SegWit wasn't just for Lightning. It also addressed, ASIC boost and transaction malleability. So it wasn't obviously a bad idea, right? It wasn't like we were being super aggressive and just throwing features on. And even that amount of progress might be too much when it's this important. So maybe we need to even move slower. I think the right attitude. I don't know exactly what should be done yet, but I think that something, right? We should seriously consider making some changes to reduce the likelihood that this happens again in the future.
Taking a slow and professional approach, long-term thinking. I like that. Keep it slow, dudes. Well, okay. Now JW's conclusionary thoughts and things he wants to talk about. This dude is involved with MathBot, with education. I want him to talk about everything out there. But as you can tell, he is a hardcore Bitcoin guy, and he wants people to understand it in a good way, and in the correct way, not to be confused. And the MathBot idea is great too. So talk about your classes, talk about MathBot. What's going on with you?
Yeah, thanks, man. So mathbot.com is a project that is basically allows people to learn math and programming. You program a robot to move around the screen and move boxes around. Once we're comfortable with Lightning, we're going to enable payments so that you can, if you have like a 9-year-old little brother, you can spend $50 for him to learn algebra. And as he passes levels, we'll pass on $45 worth of Bitcoin to him, maybe $1 a level, something like that. So that's kind of my day job. But the other project I wanted to mention is we just launched cypherpunku.com. And I have, this course, we've had like 30 or 40 people go through it, but basically it's a class that teaches you all the economics and technology that you need to have a pretty solid foundation to be smart money in this space, instead of, the guys buying Bcash. So it's 6 hours of lecture. You get 1 hour of one-on-one consulting from me. It could be anything from career counseling to, investment advice, whatever. And then I do weekly office hours where you can show up. I basically live stream it and answer students' questions. So anyway, if you're interested in that, go out to cypherpunku.com and register. And if you mention Adam or Adam Meister, we'll give you $50 off the class. So that's what I'm most excited about this week, because we're just now launching it. It's a little clunky, so you have to click on the register button in the upper right hand corner. Make sure you use your real email address, or I won't be able to get a hold of you. But yeah, that should be interesting, and it's been a lot of fun so far.
Dude, we got all sorts of people in motion here, guys. This is great. I love seeing this Bitcoin ecosystem develop. Well, that's it. That's the end of the show for today. Remember, we do this every Friday. Who knows what time it comes on Friday? It's different every Friday, but you can come and see the best guest in the space on the This Week in Bitcoin show every Friday on this channel. I do a new show every day. Saturday is the Beyond Bitcoin show. That'll be tomorrow night, definitely. I thank everyone. I thank all my guests. It was a great time. Remember, I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Remember to subscribe to the channel, like this video, share this video. Check out the links below. Pound that like button. Shabbat Shalom. Everyone have a great weekend. See you later. Bye-bye.